Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the Galactic Council, her modest diplomatic robes a stark contrast to the gleaming armor and ceremonial weapons of the other delegates. The Vorthak representative, General Thextar, clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter among his species. "So," Thextar's voice boomed through the chamber's translation matrix, "the soft-flesh humans send us another storyteller. How quaint." The other council members, the crystalline Zephyrians, the gas cloud nebuloids, and the mechanical cognitars, hummed their agreement. For 3 standard years, Earth's diplomatic corps had been the laughingstock of the galaxy. While other species brought military might, technological marvels, or economic leverage to negotiations, humans brought something far stranger: stories. Sarah smiled, unfazed by the mockery. "General, I appreciate your directness. But before we dismiss humanity's approach, perhaps you'd indulge me in a brief tale." "Another story?" The Zephyrian delegate's crystalline form shimmered with irritation. "We have serious matters to discuss: the Outer Rim territorial disputes, trade sanctions against the rebel colonies." "This story is about those very issues," Sarah replied calmly. "It's about a young Vorthak warrior named Kethran." The chamber fell silent. Thextar's 4 eyes narrowed. "You dare speak of our sacred warrior poets?" "Kethran lived during the Age of Crimson Moons," Sarah continued, her voice taking on a rhythmic cadence that seemed to resonate through the council chamber. "He was the strongest of his clutch, destined for glory in battle. But when the hive mind invaded your home system, something unexpected happened." Sarah began to pace, her hands painting pictures in the air as she spoke. "The hive mind's ships blotted out your 3 sons. Their numbers were infinite, their tactics perfect. Your greatest generals fell in the first wave, but Kethran did something no warrior had ever done before." The Vorthak general leaned forward despite himself. This was not some human fairy tale. This was their history, their mythology. But how could a human know these details? "He laid down his plasma rifles," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He walked into the enemy camp alone and unarmed. The hive mind drones surrounded him, their weapons trained on his carapace. And then he began to sing." A low thrumming filled the chamber as Thextar unconsciously began the harmonic breathing pattern of his people's morning songs. Other Vorthak delegates joined in, their voices creating a haunting melody that seemed to make the very air vibrate. "The hive mind had assimilated 1,000 species," Sarah continued over the music, "but they had never encountered poetry made flesh, songs that carried the weight of worlds. Kethran's voice told them of loss and hope, of the beauty found in struggle, of the way starlight looks different through each species' eyes." The Cognitar's mechanical forms began to pulse in rhythm with the Vorthak song. Even the ethereal nebuloids seemed to shimmer in harmony with Sarah's words. The drones stopped, not from system malfunction or tactical consideration, but because they were moved. For the first time in their existence, the hive mind felt something beyond the drive to consume. They felt wonder. Sarah paused, letting the weight of the moment settle over the council. The war ended not with Kethran's death, but with his transformation into legend. The hive mind retreated, not in defeat, but in contemplation. They had learned that some things cannot be assimilated, only experienced. Thextar's breathing had synchronized with the story's rhythm. How do you know of Kethran's song? That tale has not been shared beyond our homeworld." Sarah's smile held infinite warmth. "Because 3 months ago, during the trade negotiations, with the Centauri Consortium, your junior attaché, Yaktel, shared it with me over dinner. He was homesick, missing the singing stones of Vorthak Prime. I listened, really listened, and when I asked him to teach me your harmonics, he spent 6 hours showing me how your people turn emotion into music." The chamber buzzed with surprised murmurs. The Zephyrian delegate's crystalline form shifted into what Sarah had learned indicated curiosity. "You learned our battle cadences for negotiation purposes?" "No," Sarah replied. "I learned them because they're beautiful. Because every species has stories that matter, songs that define them, dreams that drive them forward. She gestured to the assembled delegates. The Outer Rim dispute isn't really about territory. It's about the cognitors' need to build, to create, to leave something lasting. The trade sanctions against the rebel colonies? Those colonies are mostly nebuloid settlements seeking the freedom to explore new forms of existence without the rigid structure of the main consortium. Silence filled the chamber as each delegate processed her words. But humans have no such grand heritage, the nebuloid representative whispered, their gaseous form swirling with uncertainty. Your species has existed for barely a cosmic moment. What stories could you possibly tell that would matter to beings who have sailed between stars for millennia? Sarah's eyes twinkled. We tell the stories that connect all of your stories, together. We're the species that learned to listen, really listen, to everyone else. We've collected the songs of the Vorthak, the mathematical poetry of the cognitars, the dream narratives of the nebuloids, the resonance tales of the Zephyrians. She spread her arms wide. We don't have the oldest civilization or the most advanced technology. But we have something else, the ability to see the common threads that weave through every species' experience. Love, loss, hope, fear, the desire to be understood. These are universal languages. General Thextar stood slowly, his massive form casting long shadows across the chamber. You propose that humanity serves as, what? Translators of the soul? We propose that the galaxy's greatest strength isn't in our differences, but in the stories we share about those differences, Sarah replied. Every dispute, every conflict, every trade negotiation, they all come down to understanding what truly matters to each party involved. The Cognitar's leader, Prime Unit Designate 9947, spoke with mechanical precision that somehow carried emotional weight. Fascinating. You suggest that narrative coherence could serve as a diplomatic framework more effectively than traditional power dynamics. I suggest that when you really understand someone's story, their hopes, their fears, their deepest values, it becomes much harder to see them as an enemy, Sarah said simply. Over the following hours, the Galactic Council didn't just negotiate, they shared. The Vorthak told battle hymns that spoke of honor and sacrifice. The Zephyrians sang crystalline melodies about the beauty of perfect mathematical relationships. The Nebuloids shared flowing stories about the longing to touch something solid, to understand the beauty of fixed form, and the Cognitars, in their precise way, calculated something remarkable. Since humanity had joined the diplomatic corps, successful treaty negotiations had increased by 847%. Wars had decreased by 67%. Trade disputes resolved through mediation, rather than sanctions, had risen by 923%. Remarkable efficiency, Prime Unit Designate 9947 observed. Human narrative-based diplomacy produces superior outcomes to traditional methodology. Thextar laughed, a sound like grinding stone that somehow conveyed genuine warmth. Superior outcomes, he says, as if reducing everything to numbers could capture the real victory here. What victory? Sarah asked. Before today I saw the nebuloids as formless ghosts with no understanding of honor. Now I know they dream of being solid so they can truly embrace those they love. Before today the Cognitars were cold calculators to me. Now I understand their mathematics as a form of worship, their buildings as prayers made manifest. He gestured around the chamber with one massive claw. You didn't just help us negotiate, human. You helped us see each other as people instead of obstacles. 6 months later, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before a very different galactic council. The chamber still contained the same species, but everything else had changed. Vorthak war songs harmonized with Cognitar's mathematical rhythms. Nebuloid dream stories flowed around Zephyrian crystal melodies. And at the center of it all, humans served as both conductors and audience, weaving the separate voices into something greater than any one species could create alone. The Outer Rim disputes had been resolved when the Cognitars realized their need to build could be fulfilled by helping the rebel colonies create new settlements, and the colonies realized they needed the stability that structured civilization could provide. Trade sanctions became collaborative ventures when species began sharing their stories of scarcity and abundance, fear and hope. Wars became increasingly rare, as it became harder to fight someone whose deepest dreams you understood. You know, Thextar said privately to Sarah after one particularly successful session, "My people have a saying. The sharpest blade is not the one that cuts deepest, but the one that makes the enemy realize they never needed to be cut at all." Sarah smiled. "Your people are poets as well as warriors. As are yours, it seems. Though your weapon of choice is understanding rather than steel." Understanding, Sarah mused, and the stories that make understanding possible. In the end, humanity didn't conquer the galaxy with superior firepower or advanced technology. They won it with something far more powerful. The